He's fantastic. This is his best performance ever.
But that was you. You were in that movie.
You were in a movie?
We are talking Last Action Hero. This one is directed by John McTiernan and actually written by Zach Penn and Shane Black, among others, and of course stars Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, this movie arguably is way before its time. Actually came out in 1993, and I guess if you haven't seen it, the most comparable film that I would say these days is probably Deadpool. But I don't think in 1993 audiences were really ready for a kind of a satire that was about the kind of the action movie genre, and somewhat a subversive film in a lot of ways. Now, the story here focuses on this young lad played by Austin O'Brien, and he's obsessed with films, in particular Arnold Schwarzenegger and his series of films in this universe called Jack Slater. So in this film universe, Arnold Schwarzenegger exists and he's an actor, and he's made this series of films called Jack Slater, and this lad is kind of like the biggest fan. Anyway, through a magical MacGuffin, this ticket from Houdini, this kid actually manages to enter the world of the film, and thus becomes part of the story with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but as Jack Slater, and in his world. And then about 2/3 of the movie we have Jack Slater coming out of the kind of the movie world into our world, and it's obviously you're looking at kind of movie logic versus kind of somewhat real world situations. So the movie is notable for having loads of cameos, absolutely tons, and lots of obviously references to the movie industry, in particular obviously action genres, tropes, different things like that, and obviously even Arnold Schwarzenegger himself setting himself up in a lot of ways. So let's talk about, first of all, what worked. As I said, this movie is way before its time. These days, I think breaking the fourth wall, having these kind of self-referential style movies is, you know, somewhat kind of commonplace. And we're kind of used to it now, and we appreciate the tropes. But in 1993, people didn't really get the joke. And to be fair, not all of it has kind of particularly aged, you know, all aged well. But nonetheless, watching it now, I think you gain a greater appreciation for it because it's so ahead of its time. And, you know, like I've said, it's quite fun seeing Arnie in this role, sending up himself, but also at the same time having, you know, a legitimate adventure within the film itself. So Arnie's actually a lot of fun in this movie. Actually, he plays two roles. He plays the Jack Slater character in this film world, and he actually does a version of himself as well. We've also got a fantastic bad guy turn from Charles Dance, who plays kind of like the main bad guy in the latest Jack Slater film. And what I liked here is the when this lad kind of goes into this movie world, it goes off script, and the Charles Dance character actually gets hold of this magical ticket and is able to take advantage of his own nefarious means and wants to go into our real world, where he realises the bad guys can win. Otherwise, if they're in a film, they're always going to be fated to lose. I thought that was fun. Tom Noonan as well also plays another kind of like bad guy from the previous Jack Slater film. Also gives a serial killer kind of vibe in the line of kind of like the Silence of the Lambs, that sort of thing, Buffalo Bill type of thing. So I thought he did a great job as well. And it's so fun looking at all the kind of the cameos. It's nice to see Anthony Quinn, who has somewhat of a supporting role. There's loads of kind of like blink and you'll miss it kind of moments. Obviously, we see various different nods to Basic Instinct, to kind of Terminators, to all sorts of stuff. And if you have a look at the cast list, you'll see that it's absolutely littered with Hollywood talent. The movie's plot itself, like I've said, is somewhat of a kind of a satire, but it still does follow, an action movie kind of formula, and it's quite fun, and it's kind of in its own right, and you're always kind of like you're somewhat allowed to kind of let yourself go and kind of, just agree to this kind of this silly movie logic that the kind of the movie presents itself with. And I think when Jack Slater comes into our world, because obviously we see, him coming from a world where everything is exaggerated, it's interesting to see him, feel pain like he would do in real life and things like that. I think that's actually kind of quite well handled. And this movie is littered with really fun OTT set pieces, effects, characters, over-the-top characters and stunts and things like that, and some quite good action sequences in their own right as well that you can kind of take, obviously, with a knowing kind of pinch of salt. What doesn't work? I have two critiques with this movie. By far and away the biggest is Austin O'Brien's this little boy. Unfortunately, I didn't like him back when I saw it in '93, and I don't like him now. This kid is so poorly realised. He has he's had probably more screen time than Schwarzenegger, to be honest. But he's very, very poorly acted, he's very poorly directed, and he's poorly written. So the character comes across as whiny, annoying, and a know-it-all, and it's not at all likable. Whenever he's on screen, unfortunately, it's very, very irritating and annoying. And I think, you get, okay, I'll give the kid some slack. He was probably 12 or something when he did this, but there are child actors who do a better job. And unfortunately, his kind of performance is pretty unforgivable, and it is such an annoying character. Maybe less of a problem and maybe a little bit nitpicky, to be honest with you. I feel that kind of the movie world itself is a little ill-defined. I mean, are we to believe this is the world of purely the Jack Slater universe? Or is it the movie world in general? Because obviously we see characters from Basic Instinct, we see characters from Terminator 2, which would lead you to believe this is like the entire world where all movies kind of take place. Or is it just the world of Jack Slater? Because we say, we're told later on that the bad guy is going into different movies to try and recruit villains. So in which case, that would lead you to believe that there isn't a movie world, it's just limited to Jack Slater. And to be honest, I think they go a little bit too far with some of the silliness, to be honest. We have this kind of like this cartoon animated cat. And, I get that they're trying to send up particular kind of action tropes, which I'm completely fine with, and kind of the ridiculousness of that genre. But I don't know, to me, I thought it went a little bit too silly in times for me. And I think some of these kind of like more overt, slapsticky and silly comedy moments aren't particularly kind of well realised, to be honest. And you seem you're veering away from what would be considered an action movie trope. But there you go. But overall, this movie is still a lot of fun, and I think it plays better today than it did back in '93, to be honest with you, when I think people didn't really understand what they were watching. Like I said, there are certain elements maybe that haven't aged well, and the kid is particularly annoying. But it's such a lot of fun to watch this movie, and yeah, I think you'd appreciate it more now. If you haven't seen it and you like Deadpool, then maybe check this out, because I think you might be somewhat intrigued by it. I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. I actually enjoyed this a hell of a lot on this rewatch, and I never really considered it to be one of Arnie's most, memorable films, to be honest. And having rewatched it now, I certainly enjoyed it. A considerable amount. So it's a 7 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.